PDH Pod podcast presents Monday PDH. It's a great source of PDH news, tips, and tricks, so don't forget to check it out. It is available almost anywhere you find podcasts. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more PDH content, and let's get started. In the top left, we have Stinkfist playing Lorescale Coatl, a 2/2 snake for a colorless, green, and a blue, with whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Lorescale Coatl. In the top right is Lobert playing Fusion Elemental, an 8/8 elemental for 1 mana of each color and no abilities. Brad Drac V, our host, is on Risen Reef in the bottom right. Risen Reef is a 1/1 for a colorless, green, and a blue, with whenever Risen Reef or another elemental enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top card of your library. If it's a land card, you may put it onto the battlefield tapped. If you don't put it onto the battlefield, put it into your hand. And last in the bottom left is Drainer on Gut, True Soul Zealot, a 2/2 Goblin Shaman for 2 and a red with whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature or an artifact. If you do, create a 4/1 black skeleton creature token with menace that's tapped and attacking, and choose a background, and the chosen background of Cloakwood Hermit, a legendary enchantment background for 2 and a green with commander creatures you own have, at the beginning of your end step, if a creature card was put into your graveyard from anywhere this turn, create 2 tapped 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens. Drainer and Brad take a mulligan, but everyone keeps 7 cards. To begin, Fist plays an island and passes. Lobert plays a Path of Ancestry tapped. Brad starts with a forest and passes to Drainer. Drainer drops a Racer's Ring and ends their turn. Fist plays a Careful Study at the end of Drainer's turn, drawing 2 and discarding Desert of the Mindful and Spell Snip. Brad decides to shortcut and basically cycle Ash Barrens, grabbing an island. Fist then begins his turn. The table realizes that Careful Study is a sorcery, and it was played at instant speed. Fist decides that he would rather play it out correctly, and leaves his island tapped, and passes the turn. Lobert untaps, and plays a snow-covered island that he uses to cast 3 visits, tutoring a Highland Forest into play tapped and passes. Brad plays his tutored island and ends his turn with 2 untapped lands. Drainer untaps, draws, and drops a mountain into play that they use for a Voldaren Epicure. They follow that up with Grim Initiate, put their blood token into play from Voldaren Epicure, and pass. Fist begins his turn by playing a Mind Stone, and then plays Gush for its alternate casting cost, returning 2 islands to his hand, stating that otherwise he would miss a land drop for the turn. He draws 2, and replays an island before passing. Lobert plays a Woodland Chasm tapped, uses his other 3 lands to play an Honored Heirloom, and uses the Heirloom to play Thraben Inspector, getting a clue token. Brad starts his turn, plays a forest, and casts his commander, Risen Reef. Risen Reef's enter the battlefield ability triggers. Brad chooses not to reveal the card and puts it into his hand. Drainer takes their turn, tapping out for their commander, Gut, and goes to combat, sending Voldaren Epicure and Grim Initiate at Fist. Gut's ability triggers from the attack, and Drainer sacrifices the blood token, creating a 4/1 with menace, attacking Lobert. Each defender takes the damage. Fist plays a forest, jams his commander, Lorescale Coatl, and passes. Lobert plays a snow-covered plains, and plays a Seagate Oracle. He looks at the top 2 cards of his library, puts one in his hand and the other at the bottom. He passes the turn. Brad untaps, draws, and plays an island that he uses for a Witching Well. Its enter the battlefield ability triggers, allowing Brad to scry 2, puts 1 card on top of his library and 1 on the bottom. He then uses his remaining untapped lands to play a Fertilid. This triggers Risen Reef, which allows Brad to put the island he scried to the top onto the battlefield. He passes. Drainer plays an Impulsive Pilferer and a Perilous Mirror before heading to combat. Lobert plays a Repulse targeting Gut. Gut is returned to Drainer's hand and Lobert draws. Drainer continues on with their turn, sending a 4/1 at Lobert, who blocks with his 2 creatures. Drainer's Skeleton trades with Seagate Oracle and Drainer ends his turn. Fist draws for turn, triggering Lorescale Coatl. He plays a Gataxian Probe for 2 life, targeting Brad, asking him to reveal the cards to the entire table. Brad reveals a counterspell, Ivy Elemental, Teferi's Time Twist, Thunder Drake, and Gust of Wind. Brad chooses to play with these cards face up. Lorescale triggers again, going up to 2 counters. Fist pays 3 for a Shielding Plaques, which resolves, giving Lorescale Coatl pseudo hexproof, and drawing a card. Lorescale Coatl triggers again, and Fist ends his turn. Lobert pays 2 to draw off of a clue, plays Priest of Ancient Lore to draw again and gain a life, and passes. Brad plays his revealed Thunder Drake, triggering Risen Reef, putting the card into his hand, and passes to Drainer. Drainer untaps, and replays his commander, Gut, before going to combat. Drainer attacks Fist with Impulsive Pilferer, triggering Gut. Impulsive Pilferer is sacrificed for a treasure and a skeleton that is also headed at Fist. Unable to block, Fist takes 4. Drainer is done with their turn, so Fist untaps and draws, triggering his commander. He plays a Colony Garden, which gets him a 0/1 plant creature token. He then pays 2 for a Kasmina's Transmutation, targeting Brad's Risen Reef. This resolves, and Risen Reef becomes a 1/1 with no abilities. Lobert starts his turn, and plays a Glacial Floodplain, and an Into the North for an Ice Tunnel. After tutoring, he plays a Pestilence, and passes with no untapped mana sources. Brad untaps, and plays his revealed Gust of Wind for 2 mana, returning Pestilence to Lobert's hand, and drawing. Next, Brad plays a Relic of Progenitus, which triggers Thunderdrake, making it a 3/4. Brad attacks Drainer, who goes to 27. Brad passes with 2 untapped islands. Drainer taps a forest, mountain, and uses a treasure to play Yavimaya Elder. A skeleton attacks Fist, triggering Gut. Drainer sacrifices Yavimaya Elder for 2 forests and a skeleton, also attacking Fist. Fist blocks one of the skeletons with his planted commander, while the other skeleton connects. Before ending, Drainer plays a Cloakwood Hermit, which triggers, making 2 1/1 squirrels. Fist draws for turn, triggering his commander, and passes. Lobert untaps, draws, and replays Pestilence. Brad pushes his counterspell out of his revealed cards pile and targets Pestilence. Fist plays Disrupt. Brad is unable to pay the 1, so counterspell is countered. Fist draws, Lorescale Coatl triggers, and Pestilence resolves. Lobert concludes his turn by foretelling a card. Brad pays 2 for another revealed card, Teferi's Time Twist, targeting his commander. Risen Reef is exiled, and returns to the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter. Kasmina's Transmutation falls off, and Risen Reef triggers. Brad chooses not to reveal the card. He then pays 1 to activate Relic of Progenitus, drawing a card, and exiling all graveyards. He attacks Drainer for 3 again before passing. Drainer takes his turn, playing Mogg War Marshal and heading to combat, sending a skeleton at Fist. Gut triggers. Mogg War Marshal is sacrificed, a goblin, and another skeleton is created, attacking Fist as well. Fist goes from 19 to 11, and Drainer ends his turn, creating 2 more squirrels. Fist untaps, draws, puts a counter on Lorescale Coatl, and lays down a Thornwood Falls, gaining 1 life. Fist pays 3 for a Whisper Silk Cloak, and passes. Lobert starts his turn without activating Pestilence in Fist's end step, stating that Drainer's creatures are doing what he wants. He pays for Fusion Elemental, and 2 more for Seraph's Packmate, the foretold card, allowing him to draw. Brad starts his turn by playing an island and casts Witness Protection on Fusion Elemental, turning it into a 1/1. Next, he casts Return to Nature on Pestilence, which triggers Thunderdrake. Brad pays 2 for a 1/1 Ivy Elemental to trigger Risen Reef, and puts the card in his hand. He attacks Lobert for 4 with a Thunderdrake. Lobert plays a Scred on Thunderdrake, which Brad counters with Negate. Drainer begins their turn by casting a Dragon Egg. They attack Fist with 2 skeletons, and sacrifice Dragon Egg to Gut's ability, making a dragon with fire breathing and another skeleton, also headed at Fist. Fist plays a Sheltering Word, targeting Lorescale Coatl, giving it hexproof, and more importantly, gaining him life equal to its toughness, 9. He goes to 21, takes 12, and ends up at 9. Drainer ends the turn. Fist takes his turn, triggering Lorescale Coatl. He plays an Evoked Moldrifter, drawing 2, and triggering Lorescale Coatl twice more, making it a 13/13. He equips Whisper Silk Cloak, making it unblockable, and attacks Lobert. Lobert goes to 9. Fist's turn is over. Lobert plays a Thriving Isle, pays 5 for a Wave Sifter, making 2 clue tokens, and scries a card to the top of his library off of Path of Ancestry. He attacks Brad with a Seraph's Packmate, which Brad jump blocks with an Ivy Elemental. Lobert passes. Brad draws, plays a forest, and casts an Annoyed Altasaur, triggering Cascade. Brad flips a Ram through, targeting Annoyed Altasaur and Gut. Gut dies, returning to the command zone, and Drainer takes 4. Thunderdrake triggers from the 2 spells, becoming a 5/6, and Brad sends it at Drainer, who puts the dragon token in front of it and pumps it up to be a 6/2. The creatures trade, and Brad calls it a turn. Drainer untaps, draws, plays a Gut once more, and casts Shiny Impetus, goading and buffing Brad's Annoyed Altasaur, which Brad represents with a die. Drainer attacks Fist with 3 skeletons and triggers Gut, sacrificing Grim Initiate, getting a 1/1 army and another skeleton, which attacks Brad. Brad blocks, trading the Fertilid with the token. Fist takes lethal damage and loses the game. Drainer passes, making 2 squirrels. Lobert takes his turn. He begins by attacking Drainer for 3 in the air with Wave Sifter. Post-combat, Lobert casts Ardent Elementalist, getting Scred back, which he uses on Brad's goaded Annoyed Altasaur before Brad untaps. Lobert plays Chromatic Sphere, followed by Invasive Species, which returns Ardent Elementalist to his hand. Lobert passes. Brad starts his turn plays a forest, and activates Witching Well for 2 cards. He plays Cloud Kinseer, drawing a card, and triggering Risen Reef, choosing to put the card into his hand. Drainer begins his turn, untapping, drawing, and playing Coronation of Chaos, goading both of Brad's creatures, Lobert's Wave Sifter, and making them unable to block until the end of the turn. Drainer then attacks Brad with everything, sacrificing Perilous Mirror to Gut for another skeleton headed at Brad, and dealing 2 damage to Thraben Inspector, killing it. Brad goes all the way from 29 to 5. Drainer activates the Racer's Ring that they played on turn 1 to draw a card and pass, making another 2 squirrels. On Drainer's end step, Lobert casts Cloud Shift on Wave Sifter, removing the goading and making another 2 clues. Lobert untaps, cycles Chromatic Sphere for red, plays Ardent Elementalist targeting Scred again, plays Whisper Silk Cloak, attacks Drainer for 3 with Wave Sifter, and ends his turn. Brad plays a forest, casts Terrain Elemental, triggering Risen Reef, which puts an island into play tapped. Brad casts Blur on Risen Reef, drawing a card and triggering Reef once more, putting the card into his hand. Next, he plays a Thicket Crasher, giving his Elementals Trample and triggering Risen Reef a 3rd time. Brad puts the card into his hand and passes. It's now Drainer's turn, who plays a Brindle Shoat and attacks Brad with 3 skeletons and a squirrel, which is lethal. They send everything else at Lobert, sacrificing Brindle Shoat for a 3/3 and a skeleton, which also attacks Lobert. Brad takes out 2 skeletons on his way out. Lobert blocks a skeleton with Legitimate Business Person, and Priest of Ancient Lore, Screds the other skeleton, and blocks squirrels with his other 3 creatures. Ardent Elementalist and Priest of Ancient Lore die, but Fusion Elemental lives because Brad's Witness Protection leaves the game. Drainer loses another skeleton to Lobert's blocks, as well as 3 squirrels. Lobert is now at 1. Post-combat, Drainer casts Network Terminal and passes. On his end step, Lobert sacrifices a clue for a card and untaps for turn. He draws and states that he needs to dig into an answer and plays a Prophetic Prism. Drawing, he sacrifices a clue, followed by another. He plays Lanamore Visionary, drawing his 5th card this turn, and lays his hand on the table, conceding. Congratulations to Drainer on your win, and thank you to all of the players for participating. This was a great game. Thank you for watching until the end. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content, and check out the PDH Pod podcast, available almost anywhere you find podcasts.